Hello everyone, Sam here, and we gotta talk about A Princess of Mars. This is a story by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and if you've watched my channel, you know that yesterday I started a review show dedicated to looking at Edgar Rice Burroughs' works. And this is the first one I'm doing because this was the first real novel that he published. And like a lot of writers in his time, Edgar Rice Burroughs published this in a pulp magazine. It was not originally in a book format. It was originally published in a pulp magazine that was very well known at the time called The All Story. And Burroughs' tale was published from February 1912 to July 1912. It was a serial novel, to quote Grandpa Simpson, as was the style at the time, because many stories were not published in one pulp magazine. Many of them were published over many issues, and that was the case with A Princess of Mars in 1912. The edition I have here is obviously not one of the pulp magazines. This is a little paperback from Del Rey, and the cover here is hard to see, but it's a fully painted cover showing the main character John Carter holding Dejah Thoris, the Martian princess of Helium, holding her aloft as these little, well, not little, they're very tall, Green Martians stand looking at all. And this is a scene from the book where John Carter saves Dejah Thoris from a particularly cruel Green Martian. And this was by Michael Whalen, who I'm not wholly familiar with, but apparently he did a fair amount of comic book work. And this was not a first printing. This was a new edition of an edition of Princess of Mars. I've been going on for a while. Yeah, this was the 13th printing of this particular this Ballantine edition, and it was done in May 1979. So, if I remember correctly, some of the editions had different artwork, and this one just happened to have Michael Whalen's artwork. So, it's a very cool cover. I really like it. Now, when this story was originally published in 1912, it was not actually titled A Princess of Mars. It was actually titled Under the Moons of Mars. And it became A Princess of Mars when it was later published in hardcover in, what was the date? October 1917. So about 5 years after the serial had originally been published. And it's sort of interesting, even though this was Burroughs' first novel published in pulp magazines, it was not the first one in hardcover, because the first 4 Tarzan books were actually published in hardcover before A Princess of Mars. So it's kind of interesting that already in that early juncture, Tarzan was kind of getting a lot of the attention, despite John Carter appearing in print first. But I said that it was Burroughs' first novel ever published, and that's true, but it wasn't necessarily the first story he ever wrote, because he had written some short stories before this, and according to some sources I found, he had written some other of his tales beforehand. They were kind of a mixture of ones, but supposedly this was not the first one he technically wrote, story-wise, but it was the first one that was polished enough for publication. So that's kind of an interesting aspect. And one of the interesting things is that this was the sole Edgar Rice Burroughs' book, apparently, that when it was published in the All Story, it was not published under Edgar Rice Burroughs' name. Uh, this the name it was published under was a pseudonym called Norman Bean. Uh, and the story goes is that Burroughs used that pseudonym because it was meant to be normal being, as in he's got a normal head. And the idea was that, oh, all these fantastical things, they're not coming from a crazy guy. I'm a normal, average guy. I'm a normal being. And somehow that became Norman Bean. Apparently he did not do that with all of his later stories simply because, well, a lot of people liked Under the Moons of Mars, so he had no real sense of embarrassment about it after that. But, yeah, this story is kind of unique in that sense that this was used as a pseudonym instead of Burroughs' actual name for that initial publication. But A Princess of Mars was a huge deal when it came out because not only did Burroughs release this in 1912, but a few months after the serial was completed, he released Tarzan of the Apes, which was arguably more successful and a bigger deal. Because Tarzan obviously went on to be very successful in other media and even in pulp magazines. Burroughs would put out, I think I read somewhere, it was over 24 Tarzan books. I say books. He wrote more than 24 Tarzan stories because there were some that were novels, but there were also short story collections he did where he collected short stories about Tarzan. So between Princess of Mars and Tarzan of the Apes coming out in 1912, that really jump-started Edgar Rice Burroughs' writing career. Like, they were huge deals when they came out. And, you know, this was a guy who had gone from being a U.S. cavalry scout to a miner to a failed businessman to, I think at that time he was a salesman of some kind. But this was what really got Burroughs out of that constant stream of jobs that didn't seem to pay off. This was what made him a writer, and this is where he really found his success. And Tarzan of the Apes is arguably the more influential in terms of Edgar Rice Burroughs' career, but A Princess of Mars was highly influential in its own right, and particularly it was what really jump-started Burroughs' writing career. So it is a very important story in that regard. Tarzan, and while Tarzan was very influential in a lot of jungle stories, A Princess of Mars was influential for a lot of science fiction writers. So this was highly influential in its own right as well. If you saw my episode, my first episode of excuse me. If you saw my first episode of Buried by Burroughs, you'll know that I got this at a local used bookstore last year, and there were a whole bunch of Burroughs books in there, a lot of Tarzan books, a lot of John Carter books, and a lot of miscellaneous books too. I think I got the whole Pellucidar series there too, so this is very, very cool. So what is the story of A Princess of Mars? Well, the story is about John Carter. And John Carter is a Virginian who had fought for the Confederacy in the middle of the Civil War. But when the Confederacy lost, he kind of felt aimless, partially due to the loss in the war, but also just he was a fighting man who had made his living fighting, and he just didn't really know what to do with himself. So he and a partner go west to Arizona to do some prospecting, see if they can make a fortune. Unfortunately, right as they find a mine that has a good amount of gold in it, his partner is killed by Apache, and when Carter tries to rescue his body and take him away, the Apache chase Carter, and he gets chased into a mysterious cave. And due to some strange events, he gets transported to Mars. Now, in the book, the natives don't call it Mars, they call it Barsoom. But the thing is when John Carter gets there, he learns that he has amazing strength and speed, as the Martian environment has lower gravity. And since John Carter grew up on Earth and had to deal with a heavier gravitational pull, he's actually much stronger and faster on Mars than he would be on Earth. And he's going to need all that because right after he's transported there, he gets captured by these natives who are Green Martians. They're these tall green men with 4 arms. And he has to learn how to survive on the planet, not just because of the Green Martians, but because of all the other competing factions on the planet, which include Red Martians, White Martians, and weather factory operators. That actually comes into play, believe it or not. But things also become complicated when a certain Martian princess by the name of Dejah Thoris falls into John Carter's arms, and a whirlwind romance starts between them. So it is a very basic setup, but that is the essential plot as it starts. So I'll talk about what I liked about the book first, because, well, there's actually a lot I liked about the book. The most obvious element is the setting, because obviously Mars has been used a lot in a lot of science fiction stories. I already know it was used before A Princess of Mars, but this is a really cool setting for Mars, because obviously it's a deserty environment, because it's the red planet. Everybody thinks of dusty deserts when they think of Mars. But it has this interesting element of, yeah, it's dusty, but there is an environment. There is like canals for water. It has its own sort of unique makeup. It has this their own unique mythology. They have their sort of their version of the river Styx, but where you go down it and you when you die you go to the everlasting paradise. But you have all these interesting cultural things. The Green Martians have their own sort of warrior ethos. The Red Martians have their sense of honor and high technology with shipbuilding. You have these telepathic weather operators who control the atmosphere of Mars. And you have these big white Martians who essentially the description I got of them was that they were like kind of like Yeti. They were white and big, like ape-like creatures. So there's a lot of cool settings and races here in Barsoom. So that's very cool and interesting to read about. And to talk more specifically about characters, I think John Carter is a really strong character in this, because this was something I saw someone comment about when they were talking about the John Carter movie from 2010 or whenever it was. How in that movie they kind of made John Carter, like a bit of a shell-shocked soldier who was like not, who was very tainted and somewhat messed up from the Civil War. But that's not the characterization here. John Carter is very much a soldier. He has that sort of gallant chivalry that was expected of Southern soldiers, and he still has that attitude even when he ends up on another planet, and he always does his best to like maintain this sense of like soldierly chivalry and soldierly dignity at all times. And that's a very interesting portrayal, but like a man who's stuck in this strange situation, but keeps this sort of sense of honor and this po-faced ambivalence about everything, so he can sort of fit into this strange new world. But that doesn't mean he's blandly written, because he actually does have a bit of a personal doubt. But unlike the movie, it's not like this shell-shocked veteran thing. It's more this theme of he's gone through life not really knowing what to do when there isn't a war going on. Because one of the interesting things is that John Carter is seemingly ageless. Edgar Rice Burroughs, who's a fictionalized version of Edgar Rice Burroughs, is in the story. And he remarks that John Carter doesn't seem to age. Like, he remembers him over several decades, but Carter just doesn't seem to age. And this is sort of there is a plot reason for that happening. It's because on Mars, people are extremely long-lived. They live for hundreds of years. And so you had to have I think Burroughs was mostly trying to head off the natural question of, well, wait, if this story takes place over a long period of time, how is Carter not aging? That's the explanation. He's ageless. But Burroughs also makes it clear that because John Carter doesn't age very fast, even on Earth, it kind of creates this interesting situation of he just does not know what to do, because he's living through so much stuff that he doesn't really know what to latch onto when things don't pan out. He's always kind of drifting. And he always has sort of this weird uncertainty about him. He doesn't really know what to do when one thing falls through. So it's a very interesting take on someone who has like a very downplayed concerns compared to a lot of modern characters who have like these very bombastic traumas. But here it's more of this like this sense of unease that John Carter has, where he just doesn't know what to do at certain times in his life, because there's no firm objective given like there would be in a wartime environment. So it's a very interesting characterization. The other character I think is fairly well done is Dejah Thoris herself. She's a very strong love interest, and she has the typical princess thing of she's very beautiful and she's very regal, but the story makes it clear that Mars is a warlike environment, and just because she's not technically one of the warriors does not mean she does not have her own grittiness and toughness to her. She does get into scraps with other Martians, so she's very strong in that regard. And she actually has kind of a unique romance with John Carter, because they are both drawn to each other. John immediately falls for her the second he sees her, and she's very drawn to him too. But there's kind of this interesting thing about how there's sort of this cultural divide between the two of them, because since John Carter isn't from Mars, he doesn't understand certain Martian customs and niceties and the kind of manners that a Martian should have. And this it kind of causes consternation to Dejah Thoris, who takes offense when he steps over the line of what good Martian manners dictate. But and probably the most interesting thing is this one time where Dejah Thoris, at a certain point in the story, is wedded to be with someone else. She's going to be wedded to this individual, and John Carter wants to stop it, but she wants to maintain her word and say, no, I'm going to live through the agreement even though I hate it, and I'd rather be with you, John. So there's sort of this strong sense of honor to her, even when it would be quite easy to take care of the problem another way. So she's a very interesting character in that regard. Another character that I thought was pretty well done was Thoris Tarkus. And Thoris Tarkus is one of the Green Martian chiefs. He's part of this tribe called the Tharks. And Thoris Tarkus actually befriends John because he sort of sees, oh, this is a fellow warrior. He's got a certain honorable trait. But the friendship he has is interesting, but there's actually a very cool subplot with Tarkus where it's revealed that Tarkus is actually plotting to take over the Tharks because the leader of the Tharks, who is this Green Martian named I believe it's Tal Hodges. Tal Hodges killed someone close to Tars several years ago, and Tars has been slowly stewing in his anger and hatred, and he's just waiting for the right moment for Tal Hodges to slip up. And it's a very interesting subplot where you just see Thoris Tarkus in the background just waiting for that right moment to strike. So there's also this Green Martian named Sola. And Sola is basically Carter's teacher during his initial weeks on Mars, because she teaches him the Barsoomian language. And she's very unusual for Green Martians because she's not as cruel and spiteful as many of them are. She has too much niceness and goodness to her that is unbecoming of a Green Martian in these in this environment. Green Martians don't like that kind of emotional goodness. And she kind of shows how tough a life a Green Martian lives when they are not like other Green Martians. So she's actually a very interesting character in that regard, and much like Thoris Tarkus, she has a good conclusion to her story as well. In regards to plotting, I think that the first half of this story is very, very strong, because you see how John Carter gets to Mars. You see him slowly learn about the Green Martian customs and the wider Martian customs from Dejah Thoris. But it's just very good world building. Like, this is something that you could really use as a manual for how to do some world building when you do like a Japanese isekai, you know, those stories where normal people go to these fantastical environments. This is a very good world builder for that, because Burroughs is very clever to have John Carter be an outsider forced in to this weird new world, and because he focuses on that with Carter and his learning of this strange Barsoomian world, you really get this sense of, oh yeah, we're learning stuff as John Carter learns it, and it makes sense because John Carter's learning it, so it doesn't feel like clunky exposition. Another thing I really liked about the story is that there's a lot of great reincorporation of plot points. Like there are a lot of things set up either early or in the middle of the story that do come back at later points in the story. I mentioned Tars Tarkas's feud with Tal Hodges. That's set up around the middle point of the story, but that becomes a big thing towards the end of this tale. And then you have things like at one point John Carter goes to the atmosphere plant, which controls the weather and atmosphere of Mars. And you initially think, oh, that's just like a weird stop by. Like, he stops by it, and for most of the rest of the story, it doesn't come up again until the very end. It becomes a huge factor. So, Burroughs does a lot of good reincorporation. Things that are set up earlier do get payoffs later. So, from a writing standpoint, it's very good in terms of making sure there is no fat in the story. Everything that is brought up for a reason. So that's a very good element from a writing perspective. One thing I was surprised, I kind of knew this going in because others had told me, but the story actually has a very heavy vibe of being a Western. Because, well, first of all, it starts off in Arizona, so with Apaches and looking for gold, so the Western element's already there. But even when John Carter's transported to Mars, it very much comes off as sort of a space Western, because the environment of Mars is like the classic desert environment everyone thinks of when they think of Westerns. And the Green Martians themselves kind of have the vibe of certain... there's a definite parallel drawn between them and Native American tribes. Aside from, obviously, they're very warlike, like in the way that Apache are often portrayed. So it's a definite parallel that Burroughs is drawing. And it's interesting because but it doesn't get so much to where it's distracting. You never get the feeling that Burroughs is just, grabbing Western tropes, putting a sci-fi spin on them and calling it a day. There are differences here to where it's not just a space Western. It has its own identity as a Sword and Planet story. And apparently, like I said in the last episode, Burroughs had actually been a cavalryman for the U.S. Cavalry in Arizona. So there's probably a certain amount. Obviously, I'm not saying Burroughs went to Mars, but there was a certain amount of autobiographical influence, I'm sure, for making the setting be Arizona and having this heavy emphasis on Western aesthetics. So that's very cool and interesting. One thing that I found kind of interesting in this story, and I haven't seen anyone else bring up, one of the things that everyone seems to bring up about Edgar Rice Burroughs, who's not a fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, is like the eugenicist views he supposedly had. And, when you open Wikipedia, that's like the third thing brought up in his main biography. Like, everyone who doesn't like Burroughs seems to bring that up. But it's interesting because this story, despite what many people claim about Burroughs and his eugenicist views, this story is actually more critical of eugenics than I've seen a lot of people talk about, because one of the big themes about the story is that Green Martians raise their children in these incubators, but the children are not given to their parents. They're just kind of released, and whatever child you manage to grab is the one you're going to raise, and they are your kid in a sense. But both but Edgar Rice Burroughs does not seem to portray this method as good, because the Martians are also like very tough on their children to raise them up to be like warriors or war maidens that help the Green Martian male warriors. And it's not really depicted as a good thing. John Carter kind of remarks that, yeah, that's kind of a brutal way to bring up children. And it's very much implied that Green Martians are so unmerciful and bloodlustful because of this extremely eugenic way of raising their kids, and this very indifferent way that they raise their kids, where you just, all right, pick one. It may or may not be yours, but pick one and raise them tough. So, for all the eugenicist things I've heard people say about Burroughs, he doesn't really depict it as a good thing here. It's very much depicted as a very punishing and not a very good way to raise a society. So it seems much more critical of the type of views people purport Burroughs to have. Like I said, maybe that'll change as more stories go on. But this story was way more critical of eugenicist ideas than I've seen a lot of people give Burroughs credit for. So that was a very interesting story angle, and it actually did play into the plot with Thoris, Tarkus, and Sola. So it is an interesting element. So I talked about all the good things about the story, but there were a few things about the story that did bug me from a writing perspective. Probably the one that bugged me the most was the second half of the story. And a slight spoiler, but the second half is after John Carter and Dejah Thoris escape the Green Martians. And the first half, like I said, very strongly written. You see John Carter learning about Martian society. That stuff's very good. But the second half feels rather rushed in a lot of parts. There's a lot of parts where several sections seem to be really short for some reason. They are written very tersely. These big events happen, but they're done within like 2 or 3 pages. And sometimes not even that. Sometimes they're done within a page. Or even, there's one event, a paragraph. It seems like these things that should be way bigger take longer. Like there's this one point where John Carter is caught by this other Green Martian tribe and forced to fight in this gladiatorial match. And you think, okay, this is going to be 2 or 3 chapters of him like fighting his way out or something like that. But no, he simply does a fake out with another prisoner, and then they're both gone. It's a very kind of anticlimactic way to end that section of the story. There's also this point where he has to infiltrate another Martian city called Zadanga, and he just infiltrates it rather easily. Like, there's not much pushback to him getting in. So there's just these moments in the second half where it feels like they should be a little longer, there should be a little more elaboration, but Burroughs breezes by them, and it feels very off compared to that first half where everything was, not necessarily droning on, but they were, they had a fair amount of elaboration, but they still kept the fast pace. The second half keeps the fast pace, but it doesn't entirely work with the events it describes. It feels like there should be more talked about with these events, but Burroughs does not give them much elaboration. And supposedly, I read something that supposedly Burroughs wrote like the first 2/3 of this story and sent it to All Story to ask if they were interested. And that he only wrote like the last third when he finally got approval for the story. I don't know if that's true, but it does explain a couple things. But it would explain why that second half of the story feels a little uneven. Like I said, I have no clue if that's true, but it would explain why the second half feels a little odd to me. Another thing that kind of irked me about the story was that the story does not so much end so much as it stops. Because I'm trying not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but essentially there's a final obstacle pops up with the weather factory that produces the atmosphere for Mars. But the problem is that this conflict pops up several years after the main events of the story have already concluded. And so it's kind of a thing where it feels like Burroughs was like, okay, the main story's over. I want to move John Carter on, but what do I do to do it? Oh, I'll do this weather factory thing, but it happens several years after the main events. And yeah, Burroughs did set it up earlier about what was going on with the weather factory, but it very much feels like a thing of, we need an ending to the story. I need to find up a way to get John Carter in this position. How do I do that? Let's do the weather factory. Like, it does not feel like an ending that is... No, that's just it. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a pause. Like, okay, this happened, but something needs to conclude the story. What are we going to do? Okay, we'll do the weather factory. And like I said, it is set up earlier, so it's not something Burroughs pulls out of thin air, but it's one that I think he kind of draws out too long. He gives John Carter and Dejah Thoris too long to feel peaceful, and because the finale happened so long after the main events of the story have happened, it just kind of feels like, oh, we need a climax. Here's a climax. Like, it just does not feel like a natural ending to the story. It feels more like a thing of Burroughs was like, okay, there has to be some kind of ending, so let's do this ending. It didn't feel like a natural conclusion to the story in my mind. There's also this thing of the setup for the story is that all of the writing you see in this book is John Carter's journal that he left to Edgar Rice Burroughs, because Burroughs was a relative of his. And that setup of Carter leaving the exploits to Burroughs, that kind of feels unnecessary, because this could very easily have been somebody else other than Edgar Rice Burroughs. It could have been, some other member of the Carter family or someone like that. And even the letter format, I believe you call it an epistolary format, where it's written as this memoir of his adventures. Even that kind of feels like, all right, is this entirely necessary as a format? It just feels like there's more steps involved than there need to be. Yeah, I don't know. That Burroughs, as a character who's taking Carter's exploits. I don't know. It just doesn't entirely gel for me. It kind of feels like a flourish that's there to be a flourish. Like, yeah, it's just one of those things of. I'm one of those people that, like, when I have an epistolary novel that's people writing letters or journals or whatnot, I'm one of those stingy people that's like, no, you have to have a genuinely good artistic reason to have it in that format. So I'm just kind of stingy about that element here, but it doesn't derail the story. It's just one of those nitpicks. I'm like, okay. Did you have to do it in that format? But it doesn't ruin the story, but it does kind of feel a little unnecessary. So, final ranking for Princess of Mars. I rank on the 5-star system, 0 out of 5 being terrible, 5 out of 5 being great. And this one was a pretty easy vote of 5 out of 5 stars, which is a great book in my mind. Because for all of the things I just said about my criticisms about the story, they were relatively minor. Like, they do not ruin the tale in any way. But yeah, while the second half I think can be a little uneven, the story more than gets by on the strong characters in the unique world of Barsoom. They make for a very good reading experience, and it's one of those stories where you are legitimately interested in seeing where this goes, even after it's done. So, yeah, it's just a solid story and an entertaining one, which was apparently Burroughs' main goal. There was some quote I saw on DMR Books website that talked about how where Burroughs reportedly said entertainment is fiction's main goal or something like that. And he definitely succeeds in that goal with this story. And yeah, would I recommend it to anyone? Yes. If you're really into science fiction, or especially science fantasy, because this has a lot of science fantasy elements, I think you'd really enjoy this book. And apparently this was highly influential among many science fiction authors, so obviously plenty of science fiction authors found something to like about it. So if you're into science fiction or science fantasy, I think you'll really enjoy this. Any inspiration? For those that don't know, I'm a working writer, and one of the things I like doing with these reviews is talking about whether these stories have inspired me in any way with my own writing. And this one definitely has, because even before I read this story, I kind of had a fascination with Mars as a planet. The War of the World, the War of the Worlds, the 1950s version was one of my favorite movies, and I've always wanted to set a story in Mars, so I really liked that concept, and I really like the idea of a planet that is seemingly dead to our eyes on Earth, but is actually alive with a whole different civilization. I read something that said a lot of the sword and planet stories kind of died off because as we started making scientific discoveries about, Venus and Mars and all the other planets, we slowly learned, oh yeah, there isn't any life on any of our sister planets in our solar system. But I kind of like that idea of sort of hearkening back to that and saying, oh yeah, all these civilizations that you think don't exist on these planets, no, they totally do, but there's reasons why you can't find them in the modern world. So I'd really like to kind of do a story involving that, finding a civilization on a planet we think has nothing on it, but there actually is. And I guess if I was to take the story that I was kind of thinking of when I was reading this, I was like, it'd kind of be interesting to do a story about someone who's stuck in this sword and planet situation, but instead of being a warrior like John Carter, they're, maybe someone who's not as predisposed to war and battle and has to kind of learn to become a warrior in order to survive in this land. And somebody told me that supposedly Edgar Rice Burroughs did a story kind of with that concept. It's one I'll be reading this month called The Cave Girl. Supposedly that story deals with someone who is a very cloistered, unathletic, unenergetic man who's forced to step up and become a macho warrior. Some people have told me that's what that story entails. I haven't read it yet, but if that's what happens in it, that'll be very interesting to read. So, yeah, there's a fair amount of inspiration here, and I'll be curious to see if I can make anything from this inspiration. So, yeah, this was very inspirational in a sense. Well, that is all I have to say about A Princess of Mars. You will get another review within the next day or two of Edgar Rice Burroughs' other 1912 publication, Tarzan of the Apes. I'm going to leave a link in the description to the Project Gutenberg edition of A Princess of Mars. Because for those that don't know, a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs' early work is in the public domain. So a lot of sites are able to host it without having to pay anything. And while I very much enjoy this edition of Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Princess of Mars, and I will be getting other editions of it in the near future, I wanted people to have access to it in case they didn't know how to get to it, because it's a very good story. And I think you guys who haven't read it will very much enjoy it. So if you want to check out the story but you don't have access to it at your local library, or you don't know where to find it, you can find it on Project Gutenberg, so you can check that out in the description. But yeah, this was a fun experience. I'm looking forward to some of the other John Carter stories and the rest of Burroughs' literary output. So thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you guys later with the next Burroughs tale. All right, bye.